Hey guys, it's Matt Wakeman here, MJW006, back with part 2 of my second Heads Up Sit and Go series. The second video is titled Moving Up, the $10 level, and basically I'm just going to keep the PowerPoint section of this as I mentioned in the first video. It's going to be really short, there's not going to be much theory in this. We really want to get to the tables and just start playing our matches and getting through them, and working on the in-game things so that you guys can get them thought processes right when you're playing your games. Please do excuse me, I've been a little bit sick, my throat is killing me at the moment. I noticed in the last video I did a lot of clearing of my throat and stuff, so I'll try to keep that to a minimum throughout the whole video today. So, first of all, the $10 level, the player pool is very similar to the $5 games. To a degree, they're going to share a lot of the fish. A lot of the recreational players are going to move kind of between the $5 and the $10 games. So you're going to find that the games are relatively similar. The games, the biggest difference you will find is that they're going to get slightly more aggressive, but you're going to find that as you move up through the limits, full stop. The biggest jump's probably the 10s to the 20s, where it's, the biggest jump through the limits is actually the $30 to the $50 level, which is a little bit beyond this series, but, you know, the aggression factor as you move up through the limits is going to get higher, obviously, and obviously at the $10 level, the regulars are going to be better than what they are at the $5 level. That's to be expected. There's not a great deal of regs sitting the $10 or the $5 games for that matter, anyhow. But, you know, if you do come across regulars sitting the $10 games or the $5 games, you're probably actually best at this point in time to avoid them anyway. You know, regs are good to improve your game. You know, and quite often at my level I find myself playing against regs a fair bit, just, you know, as a pure match to improve my own game. But when you're trying to actually move up through the limits, or you're just trying to build your bankroll, avoiding the regs is the best plan of attack that you can probably take. The focus points that we went through in the first video are still going to see us crush this limit as easily as what we did in the $5 level, as you saw throughout the course of the video. Just to refresh us on these focus points, we're really going to focus on reading board textures, basic hand reading, making inducing bets, and value betting and taking value optimal lines, so extracting the most chips that we possibly can out of our opponents. And basically this is what I consider the basics, and doing the basics well will lead you to beating the low stakes. In this video, because, you know, the level of play is going to be very similar to the $5 games, hopefully we're going to get something different throughout the courses of the matches, but typically, you know, the level of players that we're actually going to play against is going to be very similar to what we did in the first video. But in this video, I really want you to focus on the thought process that I use and that I vocalize throughout the matches that I play. And what I'm doing is I'm breaking down an opponent's game, their strengths, their weaknesses, and we're going to use it against them. This is what I really want you to focus on, because busting through the $10 level and into the $20 level is going to be much easier for you if you can, you know, nail down your thought process to follow one similar to what mine is. Like, obviously it's not going to be exactly the same, but thinking along the same lines and thinking the same things and looking at the same elements of your opponent's games is basically going to help you in a massive way to actually crush the low stakes heads up sit and goes. Alright, so it was short and sweet. We're going to move on to our first matches now. I'm going to pause this video. I'll be back in a second with our first matches. Hey guys, back now with my first game of this session. We're going to be playing $10 games, obviously, and we're just going to basically see the type of play that we're going to encounter at this level, and the different adjustments or the different level of play that we're going to have to make as we move up, and how our opponents play at different levels as well. Just a second and I'll get underway. Okie doke. So, excuse my my voice, and if I noticed in the last video I was doing a fair bit of coughing and clearing of the throat, so I'll try to keep that to a minimum. I've been a little bit crook, so as I said, I'll try to keep that to a minimum. We're going to lead out here and just see how he responds to our donk lead. Obviously we have top pair here, so we can withstand a little bit of action here. The turn card kind of connects with that board once again, but I also think that it's the type of card that is possibly going to allow us to get 3 straights of value, because he's going to potentially call that flop with hands like Jack 10, hands like Queen 10 as well, and it's just going to give them extra outs, so they are allowed. It's going to allow our opponent to call that extra barrel. So we're definitely going to go ahead and bet that turn. 6-4, we'll just check away. We flop bottom pair here. No need to go ahead and bet this turn, even though we turn a gutter and we've got bottom pair. Okay, so he's checking back super quick. I highly doubt we're ever getting any value whatsoever here. So, you know, when we're playing at this level, it seems like we've come across a player who's going to be very straightforward. You know, we can tell by the speed of his checks there, when he misses, he's just giving up 100%. See how he responds to a raise out of position. He opened his first hand, he min-raised his first hand, and since then it's just been limpy. So if he continues to display these weak tendencies, we're basically just going to try to just run him over. We're just going to keep raising and we're going to keep firing barrels, so we're just going to really just go in for the kill and just attack him. Okay, this is fine to be flatting here with this hand, but because he has shown us his weak tendencies and that he's relatively passive, I don't really see any need whatsoever to continue on this board. We will keep an eye on it though, obviously, so we really need to be constantly tracking our opponents and, you know, the tendencies that they're displaying at certain points in time. So if he was to adjust and get a little bit more aggressive, then we would start adjusting to that. But as for right now, he's basically showing us that he's going to play really straightforward and pretty weak tight, which is the most common type of opponent that you're going to come across in these $5 or $10 games. I'm not sure to a great deal how much difference we're actually going to find between what we saw last week. I'm going to check raise here. What we saw last week in our $5 games and what we're going to see this week in our $10 games. Because basically, you know, the difference, a lot of players are going to play both levels. Now that river there is kind of an ugly one, because given that he's called 2 straights, he could very well have a flush draw. I'm going to check here and let him fire away, because I think there's more chance that he's going to bluff that river than there is that he's going to call a 3rd barrel after we check raise him, fire the turn, and fire the river. Even though he's shown weak tight tendencies, I really don't see him calling that river there with that many worse hands, to be honest. See, I don't really see him calling with that hand. Now I think about it, I probably should have fired that river. Yeah. You know, the biggest thing there was that I hate getting shoved on that river, because, you know, if we bet about half pot there on the river, it's leaving him a nice amount of room there to shove over us. I don't expect him to necessarily shove over us with anything but the flush, but when he does shove, we're going to have to fold, whereas by checking we allow him to bluff, plus we lose less when he actually did make the flush, is what I'm trying to say. Here, it's kind of close between just putting him all in and just going ahead and betting like half his stack, or a bit more than half his stack. I'm just going to go ahead and fire here, and he sticks him anyway, so, which is pretty terrible on his behalf, his call down there, but obviously what happened there was basically that he just got frustrated that we'd been applying consistent pressure to him, and it forced him to do something which seemed a little bit uncharacteristic for this particular player. So, you know, essentially in that match, what we did is we early on in the match we established that he showed some weak type tendencies, and we took to them by just being uber aggressive, basically. You know, it's nice that we kind of ran really good as well in the match. Obviously, that's always nice. By backdooring the straight there, turning the straight in the other hand. You know, it makes it easy to be aggressive when you're actually making hands. But I really think that, you know, that would have been my approach regardless of whether we picked up a lot of hands, is when you do come across this type of player, the weak type player, is to really just be aggressive and keep pounding them and pounding them and pounding them, and then it compounds to the point where they actually make a critical error. And that's what the low stakes is about, is, you know, a lot of the players that you're going to play against in the low stakes are going to make critical errors at some point, and you need to be there to capitalize when they do make them critical errors, and you need to force them to make them critical errors. I'm just going to pause the video and I'll pull up another match. I'll be back in a second. Okay, back again, guys. So yeah, basically what I was saying in that last match is, you know, they're more prone in the low stakes to make them errors. So what I spoke about last week in, you know, trying to keep it relatively straightforward and doing the simple things right, if we can consistently do the simple things right, our opponents aren't going to be able to handle that. They're not going to be able to sustain that for long periods of time. And if we can sustain that for longer periods of time than our opponent, then we're going to, you know, have a higher win rate than what they actually do, which is what's important in heads up sit and goes. So we'll get this game going and we'll see how we go this time. So he min raises his first button and shows us a really strong hand. So obviously we're just going to go ahead and fire a C-bet here. And with this turn, we pick up spade outs, and I'm not sure, you know, I don't really have a read on this opponent at this point in time, so I'm going to check it back, see if we can get there on the river. We don't, so I can just fold if he leads out here. I don't really see any need to bet this river, actually. If he does check, I'm just going to check it back. You know, because his most likely hand are basically pairs here. You know, and by not firing a second barrel, we've really repped, you know, not much. So the 2-5, it's just going to be a check fold. That first hand, that last hand there did show us something though. It showed us that he's willing to call C-bets with bottom pair. So obviously, you know, with that in mind, we're going to assume that he's relatively stationary. You know, that's only one hand, but straight away in these matches you need to be thinking about these things and looking at these things straight away, so that you can use them to your advantage. I'm going to 3-bet him here and just see how he responds. He folds to the 3-bet. Sixes on this flop. This is the type of flop here that I'm going to check back here with sixes. Even though it's a good C-bet board, we actually have showdown value, and we don't really love getting check raised here because it's going to put us in awkward spots where we really don't want to fold our hand right now. The turn card is a pretty good one, and I am actually going to go ahead and fire this turn, and then I'll make a decision based on the river if he was to call here on the turn. If he raised us on the turn, it would be the same as basically on the flop. We'd be folding. King 10 off. Okay, so he just limps here. I'm just going to check it away. So because we 3-bet him directly last hand, last time we're in the big blind, we're going to keep an eye on if he's reverted to limping due to that, or if he's just limping certain hands. Like, what I mean by that is we've got to work out if he's limping a certain percentage of his range and then raising the other percentage of his range, or if this is a direct reaction to our 3-bet last time that he min-raised his button. We flop a 7 here. I'm going to check call this flop. Pick up a flush draw and a gut shot here on the turn. He checks it back. Here on the river, I'm just going to check call this river. I think that he can fire with worse hands, but I don't really think that he can call with that many worse hands if we were to go ahead and bet ourselves here on the river. We'll beat anyway regardless of the ace falling. But it did show us that he limped a 7 suited there. So we're going to assume now that he did actually make the adjustment based on us actually 3-betting him. So what we're going to start doing is we're actually going to start any hands which we may have considered 3-betting previously, such as this one. If he limps again, I'm just going to be 4xing it here from the big blind. And it's just going to start, you know, putting it back on him a little bit. This flop, we're definitely going to be c-betting here. We have a gut shot, but this texture is good to be c-betting. 8-9 off. I'm going to flat here. You know, to min raises, there's a pretty wide range that you can mathematically be flatting, particularly when you feel you have a post-flop edge against an opponent. When they're min raising all of their buttons at the low stakes, you can be peeling a pretty wide range out of position against them. That fold is basically just an image fold to show them that we can fold hands on the button and that we're not just raising, you know, every single button. I'm going to flat the 4s as well. And given that he 3x'd it here, which is something that we hadn't seen just yet, I'm just going to check fold here. That's trash. So basically, you know, what we've got on this guy so far is that he's a little bit stationary. He seems a little bit on the weak tights side of things again. Similarly to the last guy, he seems a little bit on the weak tight side. Probably not so much as the last guy, but yeah, he hasn't raised us at all yet. So you know, we're really gathering that all that information and putting it into one little bundle. And we've got a stationary, weak type player, so he's going to be, you know, check calling a lot. He's going to be check folding a lot, and things like that. So we don't really want to be, once he calls our C bets, for example, we don't really want to be necessarily 3-barrel bluffing against this guy once he calls one straight. But we do want to be firing lots of small stabs against this type of player, and expecting to take down a fair amount of pots with our small stabs, obviously. If he c-bets here, I'm going to check raise him, and I'm just going to fire a small little stab here at this turn. You know, when he checks back flops, it's typically particularly flops like that, like a king king 4 flop, which are going to be really, really hard to hit. I don't expect him to have a piece of that very often when he checks it back. I expect him to be playing very straightforward, so I expect him to be betting there if he has a piece of it, and checking when he misses. So as you can see, playing at the $10 game, $10 level really isn't that much different from playing at the the $5 level or the $2 level for that matter. We may get, when we get into a couple more matches, we may see the more aggressive side of some $10 players, which is probably a little bit more aggressive than what the aggressive side of players are in the $5 matches. So as you move up, the players are going to get obviously more aggressive. But we haven't actually run into that just yet, so we'll see how we go at trying to get some of that action. I'm going to bet here. It's a pretty standard c-bet spot. But this is a pretty classic way ahead, way behind situation. Even though there's a flush draw there, I don't expect to get 3 streets here. So I'm going to check back this turn, and I'm going to fire the river or call a river bet. That river is obviously not the best river in the deck. I'm definitely going to call here, but actually, yeah, I am going to call here. But the fact is, on this flop, once he check calls this flop after he's been check folding so much, it's kind of a way ahead, way behind situation where either our pair of queens is best and it's going to be very hard for him to actually improve unless he has a flush draw, or he has an ace here. So, and we're in strife. So by checking back the turn, it gives us opportunities to allow him to bluff as he did on the river, and also reduce our losses when he does have that way ahead situation on us. There's no need for me to bet there with bottom pair. Even though we turn a straight draw, there's just no need at all. We have showdown value, and this guy so far has shown us that he will allow us to get to showdown. So c-betting this flop, once again, 1 big card, 2 little cards, great flop to c-bet. We can basically c-bet at will against this guy so far because he really hasn't shown anything to suggest that he's capable of check raising us with air, or check raising us at all for that matter, nor has he shown us really that he's willing to float. He floated last time on the ace-ace queen flop, which is maybe his way of making a stand, but realistically he's check folded to way more c-bets than what he has actually floated us. On this flop, it's pretty wet. I'm going to check it back. This is the same as the sixes situation a little bit earlier, and I'm going to go ahead and bet this turn. We pick up a gut shot to go with our hand, but there's not that many hands worse which are actually calling from this guy on a Jack 10-10 flop or a Jack 10 flop. So he's starting to put out these little min c-bets. If he keeps that up, I'm going to start raising him because I'm going to stop believing him. At the moment, I think he's done it the last 2 times, which is fine when we've got a read that he's a little bit weak tight. We can give him credit for them little c-bets on them flops. But if he was to continue it, we're going to pretty quickly stop believing him and start check raising him. Okay, so this is a different texture to the Jack 10-10 flop. I am going to c-bet this board without under pair because it's just a good texture to be c-betting. 1 big card, 2 little cards, as I mentioned before. Check back the king turn. The king was a pretty good turn to barrel, but as I mentioned before, once he calls the flop, we're basically going to give him credit a lot of the time, and we're going to shut down, particularly when we have showdown value. I mean, if I had a hand like, I don't know, 9-3 off there, for example, I may fire a second barrel at this. Well, 9-3 off would have been the best hand, but if I did have 9-3 off, for example, I might fire at this card because this is a really good card to barrel. Actually, 9-3 off wouldn't have been the best hand. He had a pair. But when you get a dry board like this and you fire a C-bet, they check call. An overcard to that big card is often a really, really good card to go ahead and fire a second barrel at. I'm going to go to min raising now because his effective stack is around about 15, or well, yeah, 15 big blinds. So he's basically getting pretty short, and he showed us that he can shove that kind of stack. So we're going to start playing a push foldy game now that he's under 20 BBs, and we're going to keep an eye on his shoving tendencies. Obviously, we're going to keep raising. It's not going to deter us from raising. But if he was to do it again here, I might go ahead and limp next time. Would be an adjustment that I'd make. Might tighten up my actual raising range to hands which can only hands which can call shoves. But I'd start limping these medium type hands which can flop decently. Here I'm going to check back this turn, basically as a trap because I want him to think that that card scared me. He has shown us that he can donk bluff the river, and I'm just going to shove. And he flopped the nuts, so that's always nice, which is fine. Okay, so that's basically just a caller. It kind of made me look like an idiot, but anyway. So we raise King 7 suited here out of position. The effective stacks are a little bit shorter because we're at 20-40 now. So the maximum it's going to be is basically, 35 big blinds deep, which is basically what we're at. We flop top pair and he just folds as he does. Jack 10 suited here. Definitely a raise here on the button. We flop a diamond draw on another good board to c-bet, which I will c-bet. He tanks for some reason. Okay, so he check called the nuts last time, so even with the nuts he wasn't prepared to go ahead and check raise us, so if he does go ahead and check raise us, it's going to be a pretty strange occurrence, I think. But you can see how weak passive he's been. If he min c-bets here, I'm just going to check raise him. But he doesn't, and we turn trips. Okay. So you just have to keep running them over. Obviously they're going to make hands. The king-queen hand versus the 7-8. That just happens. They're going to make hands at times. Nothing you can do about it at all. Oh my god, what the hell? Yeah, they're going to make hands at times. It's going to happen. You just need to stick to your game and just keep being aggressive and keep pushing them around. And just keep grinding away at them as we've done. That was a bit strange. Check shoved even. I'm stunned. So he may be just getting a little fed up with us. I'm not sure. Flop a nut flush draw here. He leads. This is the first time he's done this. If I was to raise here, I'm only getting it in with hands which are ahead of us at this point in time, and I don't really need to take that small an edge right now. I make the nuts on the, well, it's not the nuts because Jack 10 of hearts is the nuts, but I highly doubt that he's leading the stone cold nuts. I'm going to flat again here on the turn. You know, I actually don't know what that turn flat achieved. I may as well have just gone ahead and shoved that turn, or min raised him or something like that. I'm going to put a really small value bet out there because there's not, given that we've got the ace, there's really not that much that he can call us with. I mean, we'll be lucky if he calls us with the king of hearts here. I think we kind of butchered this turn. I was too busy yakking. And he wants to call me a moron. Tell him we have it. Might make him call. Apparently he doesn't like me. And he folds. Bloody Australians, I tell ya. They're vulgar, aren't they? Okay. I don't know what he's doing. Possibly typing more abuse in the chat box for me. I can check raise this flop and be happy to get it in. This is significantly different to the last situation because in the last situation, if we shoved the flop, we were relatively even stacked, so we were around about 30 BBs deep. In this situation, I'd be check raising and getting it in because my check raise would represent half of his stack, basically. So what happens there is I get fold equity with my check raise, obviously, but once I actually put that check raise in, half his stack in, I'm actually getting the odds to be calling it off. On top of that, even if he doubled, even if we'd missed, he only doubles to 1500 anyway, and we're back to where we started. So we've taken the shot at taking him out, and we may have taken, you know, a very marginal EV spot, but we, on top of that marginal EV spot, we had the opportunity to take him out. Queen 5-0. Check this flop. If he checks back, I'm going to bet the turn. The stacks here are way too awkward for me to be check raising him with nothing. Because as I said last time, if I check raise, I'm basically committed to calling with any two cards once I put half his stack in. Like, obviously I can't call with Queen 5, but I'd be almost getting the odds to. I don't think he likes me very much. 7-5, I'm just going to limp. And I'm going to c-bet. And I'm going to expect him to fold. I don't know what he's doing. I think he's a little bit frustrated. But, you know, this is what you get sometimes. You know, players just don't know how to respond to your aggression. They get a little bit tilty, they get a little bit anti. You just need to know when they are being a little bit tilty, and really observe what that tilt actually does to them, and what adjustments you need to make personally to counteract that. Obviously this dude here, even though he's a little bit tilty right now, the adjustment that he makes is nothing. He just keeps playing really bad. I'm going to fire this turn. I checked back this flop because it's really wet. But once he checks the turn, I'm always going to fire it. Ace-2, if he limps here, I'm just going to shove any ace with 10 BBs, particularly against a weak player like this. I'm going to be shoving. We don't really have a solid idea on what this guy's calling ranges are, because he may make a frustration call. But generally speaking, if someone displays weak passive tendencies throughout the course of the match. When it comes to push folding time, they're still going to be weak passive. Their calling ranges are going to be way too tight. Their shoving ranges are going to be also way too tight. You know, that's kind of an assumption that you can almost make a lot of the time. So, you know, obviously you need to stay on your feet, and you need to continually be thinking about it, and you need to be analysing the match dynamics at any given point in time. But as a default, if someone's acted in one way throughout the course of the match, in all likelihood when it gets to playing 10BB or 15BB poker, they're going to play in a very similar manner when it comes to push fold time. I'll fold the 3-6. You know, when he's only got that many big blinds, there's not much I can do with 6-3. You know, I'm not really all that happy to be shoving 6-high. King high is good. And I'll be getting it in with this hand. Even if he'd shoved there, I was getting it in with that hand. Obviously the ace queen I can shove. And snap call. Off to the races, and we get there. See if you'll accept a rematch. Okay, so I'm just going to pause this video and I'll try to find someone a little bit more exciting. He says GGDH. What does DH mean? Be back in a sec, guys. Obviously it means D-head, but okay, be back. Okay guys, back again. I'm going to try to get 2 more games onto this video. Basically, you know, I haven't come across any uber aggressive plays in the first 2 matches. Have been both weak passive. But what I want to do is just sit lobbies in $10 games and just see whatever comes my way and just play them games and try to get as many games onto the videos as I can. Because that's the environment that you guys are going to be working under. You know, you're just going to have to take it as it comes, which is what I'm doing at the moment. Just sitting in the lobby and taking whatever action I can get and recording it. This guy is an Australian, so we may actually not cop any abuse off this guy. So let's get it underway and let's see what happens. Okay, so we may have just struck gold. We may have got that aggressive player that we were searching for. I'm not going to, you know, there's nothing to suggest that he is going to be that aggressive player that we've been searching for. So going ahead and raising this flop straight away with no current reads would, you know, be kind of silly, because we don't know if he's going to be a stationing maniac who's going to both bet a lot and actually call a lot of our raises. Basically, we just need to establish what type of player he is to start with, because for all we know, he could have had aces in the first hand. You know, it would be a strange way to play aces, but we actually have no read, so you know, we have to take it as it comes and try to develop reads as we go through the match. Here, both times he snap called our raise from the big blind. That time we flopped top pair and he min donk leads. We're obviously raising in that situation. Because he has snap called both of our raises from the big blind, if he continues that, you know, we're going to adjust our raising range. If he's going to flat every single time from the big blind, then we're going to obviously adjust our range and possibly start limping some hands. Or I'm not 100% sure who it was mentioned it in the forum the other day, actually. The possibility of actually making your raise size a little larger, which is also a pretty smart thinking, really. If someone's going to call every single time out of the big blind, then making your raise size a little bit larger and punishing them while they're out of position, making them play bigger pots out of position, is probably a pretty smart way to play against this type of player. Here we flop a flush draw and a gut shot, and we have a hand which isn't going to be in that bad a shape against any hand. So in this situation we can go ahead and see how he responds to a raise after he donks full pot. And he shoves this turn. Okay. I kind of have to fold. I've got around about 13 outs, and this overshove, I'm just not getting the odds to call it off here. So I'm going to fold. But we can probably take from it that he's, that full pot donk lead is strong. Is basically what we can take from it, I think. And here I'm going to c-bet really small, and see if we can get him to make a play at us, which he doesn't oblige. But because they are, in the low stakes, they're generally thinking on first or second level. By making little inducing bets like that, by making small c-bets rather than a normal c-bet of about 280 or about 240 there, basically what we do is sometimes we make them spaz out, with them not recognizing what we're actually doing at that point in time. He limped this time. It's the first time in a few hands he's limped. I don't know if I can't really call a third barrel here. I don't often see, he has shown us that he's aggressive, but at this point in time I don't know if he's capable of triple barrel bluffing. We only chop with an 8, and even though he limped pre-flop, which was a little bit out of character for him, I don't really see us beating all that much there when he goes ahead and fires the third barrel. It's a little bit marginal, and rather than taking that marginal spot, I'd much rather figure him out a little bit more and develop a better read before I go putting my chips in that kind of situation. I'm check raising here. This is a good board to check raise, and I am going to fire another barrel at the turn once he calls. I think we get a lot of folds here, and I'm shutting down, obviously, unless I hit an 8 or a 4 on this river. Definitely shutting down. Okay, so he is stationary, he is aggressive, but when he's checked, he's folded to the c-bet every single time. Okay, so once again, we're just developing our read in the early stages of the matches, and really trying to just get a feel for our opponent. So when you're watching, when we're going through this video, I think the biggest part of it is just concentrating on the thought process that I'm going through, and focusing on, I don't know what he can have here. Most likely a hand is an overpair or a pair, which is in all likelihood an overpair. I'm just going to fold. Yeah, the most important thing to think about is the reads that I'm developing as we go through these matches, and trying to incorporate that thought process into your game when you're going and playing low stakes heads up, sit and goes, and thinking in the same manner, deducing certain things about our opponent's range the same way that I've done throughout the first couple of matches and throughout the first video as well. So he paused a little bit there before he checked that flop, and then he check called for the first time. Check call here, turn 2 pair. He's not going to go ahead and barrel this time. Basically, I checked that turn, and I didn't check raise that flop because I wanted him to barrel, because he had shown us that he was willing to go ahead and barrel. And that check, he just keeps check folding. I'm going to 3-bet him, see how we go this time. It's not the greatest hand to 3-bet. In fact, it's a pretty bad hand to 3-bet. But if you are going to 3-bet hands like that, you have to be very aware that post-flop you're not going to go and spew chips everywhere, even if you flop your ace. You know, you have to be prepared to actually try to keep the pot relatively small out of position when you do 3-bet a hand like ace-8 off and get called. At least this guy's playing a little bit faster than what our last opponent wanted to, which is always nice. I'll take a little stab here. He checked back both streets really quickly. It kind of suggested that he had nothing. Considering this guy's been kind of bet whenever he gets the opportunity to, I would expect him to be betting when he has any piece of the board. So, and I expect him to check fold again. So, you know, now we need to start thinking about when he does check flops and we do actually hit a piece. We have to start thinking about possibly checking it back now, because he's just check folding. When he checks flops, he's check folding like every single time. So I'm gonna start. Wow, that's a pretty easy fold. We're gonna start thinking about ways that we can actually try to get value out of our hands when we do flop a hand and c-bet. And rather than c-betting it, think about ways that we can try to possibly get some value out of it on later straights. So he made that 3-bet and shove, and basically he's just shut down since he made that play. We're going to flat the a6 here. We flop bottom pair. He checks back. I'm going to bet this turn. If he calls or raises, obviously we're folding. If he calls here, we're shutting down. Particularly when that river rolls off. I'm just going to give it a second before I actually do check it down, because we have showdown value. Actually, I'm going to put a blocker bet, and you know, I've said this in the past that I really hate blocker bets, but in the low stakes they can be really effective at actually stopping your opponent from raising. A lot of them are hesitant to raise. I mean, this guy probably wasn't the perfect candidate to do this against. And I'm going to fold now, even though it's just a min raise. The whole point of this was basically to lose the absolute minimum, you know, and not face a bet on the end. When he does raise, I'm just going to fold. There's 4 to a straight out there. We don't really beat anything. I'm going to flat this min 3-bet. We flop middle pair here. I'm going to check it back. If he bets his turn, I'm going to call. And we make the nut full house here on the end. Oh, obviously 8s if there's a better full house, but I can pretty safely shove and expect to get called here on the river. So I may have just been Mr. Run Good, and I was, which happens occasionally. But you know, that's basically it. You know, you can peel. That's the point of peeling min 3-bets, and why min 3-betting is so horrible in the first place. You know, he min 3-bets aces here. I peel with any 2 cards that I've opened, which is mathematically correct. He sets a tarp. He tries to trap me on this flop by checking. I check it back. You know, I'm not folding to a bet on the turn because he's represented, you know, basically nothing at this point in time. And then we fill up on the river and he puts his money in then, so oh no, I missed the last hand. Oh, I do run good. So in the last hand there, I think you've seen me shove. He called with Queen 6 for 15 big blinds, and I flopped the stone cold. So that's always nice. I'll load up another game and I'll be back in a second. So back again, guys. I'll probably likely make this the last match on this video. and I'm going to get it underway. Hopefully it doesn't get too long. If this match goes really short, we'll open up another one. But we'll start working our magic again, and we'll start trying to get a read on this player and start, try to categorize his tendencies and establish what type of player he is, and then move on to finding ways to exploit them tendencies. Here he flats from the big blind. We get an ace-king-10 flop. He does the same thing as our last friend, and I'm just going to fold. Once again, early on, we really have no idea what that means at this point in time. So for now, I'm just going to let it go on a dangerous flop like that. Basically, if our opponents had done this, both times I've folded early in the match, but basically if our opponents do things like that, on boards in which that would have been really good to c-bet, so let's say for example a king 3-6 rainbow flop, that was probably a mistake, that raise, wasn't paying much attention, but for example a king 3-6 rainbow, and they donk full pot at you, first hand that you've raised. In that case, there can be a case made for actually going ahead and raising to like 320, because in that situation, the likelihood that they're just bet folding is much higher than if the chances that someone's bet folding on, let's say, on that, what was it, an ace-king-10 flop. Okay, I got a little bit sidetracked there. In that 7-3 hand, the min donk lead, I just wanted to find out what it meant, so I went ahead and raised. It was a really bad board to actually go ahead and raise on, but given that he just flattered, I probably should have bet that turn, and I think I did consider betting the turn, because a lot of his hands are made up of draws, which he's going to let go of on the turn. In this situation here, flop a flush draw, he min donk leads, we raise. The turn comes with a pretty good double barrel card. He min raises this. This is a really strong line, but right now I'm getting 180 into 840 to hit 9 outs to a flush, so I'm going to actually peel it. He was just giving us, his check min raise there on the turn was basically giving us the odds to draw to the flush there. We miss. When he fires so quickly, he's always obviously got a queen or a jack here, and in a lot of cases he's actually got queen jack here, so just let it go. Okay, so I think this is the first time we've been at a pretty decent chip advantage to start a match, so we're going to see how we go at battling back here. And we can't get any of our flush draws there. I probably shouldn't complain, because in the last few matches we've just got absolutely everything there, so. He's been flatting all of our raises basically out of position, and he's being relatively aggressive post-flop. So I'm just going to reduce the trash that I actually raise on the button. And I'm just going to, now we have, a really strong hand here, so. But yeah, I'm going to reduce the amount of trash that we're actually raising on the button, and just start folding some hands on the button. Start doing things more for value, because he has shown us that he's going to be relatively aggressive post-flop, so we want to be doing things mostly for value as well. Okay, so this is a funny little spot. We've 3-bet pre, and he's flattered us. We've got a flush draw and second pair here, but it's the type of flop that he's just going to shove on us on a lot of the time. And we're going to kind of have not all that great an idea of where we are if he was to shove over our bet there. I can go and bet this turn though. When he checks back, I expect him to bet an ace here every single time on this flop, and then in all likelihood he's peeling, he's going to check back flush draws, some middle flush draws. I mean, this board ran out really horribly for us. I'm just going to see if I can block him a little bit here, or he can just snap fold like that. So, you know, I think on a board like this, we're raising that. On a board like this one, I think that he can definitely. I'm c-betting this board. He can definitely shove over us with flush draws and aces on this flop. So we're going to be in a pretty strange spot if we were to c-bet there and he was to shove on us. However, by checking there, he's going to check back a lot of his flush draws, scared that we're trapping, and he's going to typically bet a lot of his aces on this flop. We can probably peel one bet there, depending on his bet size on that flop. The board ran out really horribly for us, but once he peeled that turn, I think that is a flush draw a lot of the time. And obviously it was a flush draw by the speed in which he folded that river when we bet tiny. So he obviously checked the fold button. We just had jacks and we raised out of position and he just folded to our c-bet. Alright, so I think we're back up with the action now. I've kind of been rambling on for a little while now, so hopefully we can get our focus back here on the match. So he seems, basically so far, he seems kind of semi-competent. You know, he's doing obviously donkish things like the little donk leads, and he seems a little bit protective of his hand, so he gets a little bit cally. He's giving us odds and things like that, but he seems like he's using somewhat selective aggression in certain spots, which is always good for a player to actually have. He's just got no idea with his raise sizes. So here he limps, he limp clicks it back at us. I'm going to be trying to get it in here. You know, this can mean a wide variety of things. Typically, when he actually goes ahead and shoves, it's a pretty strong hand. I expect to see a strong hand here a fair amount of the time. But ace-king suited is the nuts. I'm not folding. And we get crushed. So good game us. I mean, that's pretty standard. When you're only that deep, I'm always going to get it in with ace-king suited pre-flop. I think I'm going to wrap this up now with that disgusting beat. I think I've rambled on a fair bit now in this last match, but hopefully throughout the course of this video, what you guys can see is the thought process that has to go into adapting to your opponents, which is the most important thing when you're starting to move up through the low stakes, is really starting to kind of claw onto your opponent's tendencies, observing well, and taking notes of, well, you know, I haven't physically taken any notes in these matches, but typically I am taking notes. But noting things that they do early in the match, and start to really gather an idea of what type of player they are, and then you can start making some certain assumptions about the way that they're going to play, and you can start making adjustments in your game in order to abuse what they're actually doing. So that's the most important thing that I want you guys to basically take out of this video. Next week we're going to move on to the $20 games, and I think the biggest jump in the limits, in the low stakes, is going from the $10 games to the $20 games. In the $5 and the $10 games that we've gone through in the last couple of weeks, a lot of the players and a lot of the fish are playing a combination of both of them, of the $5 and the $10 games. So you really get a pretty similar demographic in them limits, even if the $10 games are a little bit, you know, the fish are a little bit better. But really, when you jump up to the $20 games, you need to start thinking different along different lines, and you're going to start coming across players who have a fair bit more idea on what they're actually doing. So your analysis of certain hands and your analysis of an opponent's tendencies is going to be under scrutiny a lot more. So next week we're going to jump into the $20 games. They get a lot more aggressive. That should be a little bit more interesting. I hope you've enjoyed this video, guys. If you have any questions or any feedback on the video, please feel free to post it in the forum. This is Matthew MJW006 Wakeman signing out for video 2 of Heads Up Sit and Go's Bankroll Builder. I'll talk to you guys soon.